Queen Marika the Eternal, a god, immortal. Much has already been said about this powerful and enigmatic figure, but in today's video, I'm not here to talk about Marika as a divine symbol or the central figure of the Golden Order. I want to explore her as a shaman, a mother, a woman, a lover, and a queen. Beyond that, I will connect Marika's story, loved by some, hated by others, to literature and history. And before I start, I want to thank the 1,000 subscribers who believe in my idea to mix lore with history, literature, and philosophy. Welcome all to the channel. So, this is Marika's story, a narrative journey that delves into the woman behind the eternal. Ah, Marika, a character who changed the course of history in the lands between. Complex, multi-layered, and, as some would argue, shaped by different personas. Her history begins not as a queen or a god, but as a shaman, possibly one of the Numen, a mysterious people from outside the lands between, long-lived but few in number. The name Numen might remind us of Numenor, the mighty kingdom of men, respected by the valor in Tolkien's world presented in the Silmarillion. A once beautiful civilization that became corrupted by pride, seeking to dominate and enslave others they saw as inferior. Eventually, Numenor was destroyed by the Valar, and only a few survivors escaped, among them Aragorn's ancestors. If Elden Ring's Numen were inspired by Tolkien's Númenóreans, they then too may have been survivors of a lost civilization who sought refuge in the lands between. Those survivors become the Shaman people, the tribe Marika belonged to, much like how the Dúnedain, descendants of Númenor, endure in exile. Marika's very origin, then, is steeped in the aura of lost, ancient lineage. We know little of the shamans, except that they lived in a matriarchal society with customs unlike any others. Perhaps because of those customs, foreign, mystical, and independent, they become targets of the Hornsents, a powerful civilization that rule over the lands between. In my view, the Hornsents formed a cohesive society with enough power to control and subjugate other tribes they saw as lesser. Over time, perhaps centuries or even millennia, the Hornsents came into contact with the Shaman people and recognized their mystical potential. Like the Númenóreans in Tolkien's lore, the shamans were not ordinary humans, but unlike the Dúnedain, who remain resilient, the shamans become subjects of violence. Experimentation, enslavement followed, and Marika witnessed it all. I believe Marika was taken in by the Hornsents as a child and raised among them, perhaps with few memories of her ancestral roots. Yet, she never forgot the destruction of her people. She earned the trust of the Hornsents, and through sheer will, mystic power, intelligence, and even her sexuality, she rose to power, as Hornsent Granddam bitterly calls her, Wanton's trumpet. Eventually, the survivor reached unimaginable heights. The greater forces of the world, the two fingers, messengers of the greater will, recognized Marika as an Imperia, a candidate for godhood. In a classic hero's journey, the orphaned outcast ascended in the gate of divinity, transcending her mortal origin. There, Marika became the vessel of the Elden Ring, the mythic source of order. A new age began, the age of the Earth Tree, symbolizing the grace of the greater will. And yet, in that very moment, she betrayed the Hornsents, setting her vengeance in motion. To honor her memory of her lost people, Marika sealed away her village, hidden within the Shadow Keep. A beautiful place, untouched by war, but utterly abandoned, a ghost of her past. The player only glimpses it after great effort, and even then, it speaks more through silence and beauty than exposition. Despite wielding divine power, Marika never forgot the fragility she survived. Her pain became purpose. She resolved to build a more orderly world, one where the chaos that destroyed her people would never return. Marika, the survivor, became a god, but the scars of her past were not so easily left behind. Marika's role as a mother is central to her history and legend. As the divine queen, she took consorts and gave birth to a lineage of demigod offspring, each powerful and each tragically flawed. In the early days of the Golden Order, Marika married the fierce warrior Godfrey, formerly Horalu, her first real consort. With him, she bore at least 3 children, Godwyn the Golden and the twin omen Morgoth and Mog. Later, with her second consort Radagon, she gave birth to the twins Miquella and Malenia. Through this marriage to Radagon, who already had children, Marika also became the stepmother of Rani, Hadan, and Rykard. It was a royal house of gods, a family of divine blood. From the outside, Marika may have appeared to be the blessed All-Mother, surrounded by glorious heirs destined to rule forever. But the reality was far darker. Every one of her children would suffer. Her legacy as a mother is not one of peace, but of loss, sorrow, resentment, and somewhere love. Let's remember that George R.R. Martin contributed to Elden Ring's mythos, and that's no small detail. His writing in A Song of Ice and Fire gives us a lens through which to read Marika's character. Not unlike Cersei Lannister, a woman shaped by trauma who becomes a tyrant in her pursuit of safety and control. Cersei was forced into arranged marriage with Robert Baratheon, endured abuse, and clung to her only source of affection, her brother Jaime. All her children born of this taboo love met tragic ends. Her downfall came from both divine defiance and the consequences of her vengeful decisions. She was no saint, but she wasn't entirely a villain either. Cersei once heard a prophecy. Her children would wear crowns and shrouds, and indeed, she outlived them all. Marika's fate with her children is eerily similar. One by one, her offspring fall, either to curses, bloodshed, or abandonment. Her firstborn, Mesmer, is cursed with a serpent that slowly devours his soul and with flames that burn him with eternal agony. Like Mesmer, Melina, another possible daughter of Marika, is connected to fire and possibly to the Glow-Eye Queen. This mysterious queen, for me, may have been ancestor or spiritual predecessor to Marika, a powerful shaman who escaped Hornsand rule and founded a shadowy cult. In Bonny Village, we find an old snakeskin beside a statue of Marika and near the gesture O Mother. It is a tribute to Marika or to the father of Mesmer. The truth remains veiled. Then we have her children with Godfrey, Godwyn, Mog, and Morgoth. In my view, none of them are truly cursed. Mog and Morgoth were born as omens, beings with bestial traits tied to the crucible, the primal chaos of life. But this wasn't a divine curse. It was a cruel judgment by society, which labeled them as impure and cast them into the sewers. I talk more about this in my video on Foucault and the outcasts. Even Godwyn, often seen as the perfect heir, may have had latent crucible elements, only less visible. That might explain why the dragons respected him. If Godwyn carried Hornsand blood, or a deeper affinity with primal forces, his bond with fourth sex, the ancient dragon who stood by his corpse, becomes all the more meaningful. To understand why her children with Godfrey were so close to the crucible, we need to consider Godfrey's identity. Many fans, myself included, believe he was either a Hornsand himself or someone from a subjugated tribe later assimilated by their civilization, not unlike how the Roman Empire absorbed tribal cultures into its imperial system while retaining their symbols and warriors. Her children with Radagon were indeed cursed, just like Mesmer and Melina. With him, Marika birthed the cursed twins, Malenia, who suffers from scarlet rot, and Miquella, eternally trapped in the body of a child. Naturally, we begin to think of forbidden relationships, especially with Martin's involvement in the lore. I like to believe that Martin initially conceived these children as offspring from a taboo union, perhaps between Marika and a close blood family. We don't know who fathered Mesmer and Melina, but in Martin's vision, Radagon may have been Marika's brother. Of course, From Software altered that premise. Radagon is revealed to be Marika's male counterpart, literally the other half of her divine being. As a shaman, she may have had the power to split her essence, creating a masculine double. Mesmer and Melina might be children of Marika and Radagon, or of a primitive, half-formed masculine self Marika created before mastering that divine duality. Again, Elden Ring's myth draws from real-world cultures and histories. It's entirely plausible that the developers reference societies that defy taboos, practicing familial intermarriage to maintain divine or royal purity. In ancient Egypt, this was institutionalized, especially during the New Kingdom and Ptolemaic dynasty. Pharaohs often married sisters or daughters to preserve the divine bloodline. Cleopatra VII, for example, married her brothers Ptolemy XIII and later Ptolemy XIV. The Inca civilization follows similar practices. The Sapa Inca, seen as a son of the sun god, would marry his sister, the Coya, to ensure the sanctity of divine descent. And so we return to the central question: did Marika love her children? It's not a simple answer. Unlike Cersei, who deeply loved even her monstrous son Joffrey, Marika feels more ambiguous. She seems to have used her children as instruments, pausing her political and divine agenda. In some cases, she literally disposed of or confined them. Some describe her as an abusive parent, not because she hated her children, but because she was trapped in a cycle of trauma and duty. She had once been a victim. In time, she became the abuser, passing on her pain to the next generation. And yet, perhaps there was love. Mesmer, though abandoned, speaks of his mother with affection. And we know that Marika shattered the Elden Ring out of grief for Godwyn. But beyond that, it was also exhaustion, the toll of everything she had endured. Even as the leader of a violent theocracy, Marika was still a woman, broken by centuries of loss, divine servitude, and impossible choices. She lost her children to curses and war. She lost her firstborn in a cruel assassination. She abandoned her own essence for the Golden Order and the Greater Will. In the end, nothing truly human remained. To me, Marika resembles literally characters who slowly descend into villainy, not born evil, but shaped by pain. A grey figure, not black or white. As Melina recalls Marika's words, "Hear me, demigods, my children beloved. Make of thyselves thy which you desire. Be it a lord, be it a god. But should ye fail to become aught at all, ye will be forsaken, amounting only to sacrifices." There is love in those words, and sorrow. But there is also cruelty. Marika, the mother, was no nurturer. She was more interested in creating a powerful lineage of future descendants. Now, I want to explore a key duality within Marika's character, the contrast between the faithful wife and mother, capable of producing strong heirs, as seen as her relationship with Godfrey, and the seductive, manipulative figure, able to bend others to her will. Marika is not a character who can be easily reduced to archetypes. As I said before, she shares certain traits with Cersei Lannister, a character many despise at first, but gradually come to understand through Martin's nuanced writing. Cersei is not the only one. Her twin brother, Jaime, begins as a detestable but slowly becomes more sympathetic, especially as we see how deeply he was controlled by his father and Cersei. Likewise, when I think of Marika as this powerful woman who rose from a shamanic outcast to a divine queen, I see someone who learned to control those around her. Marika was clearly worshipped by the Hornsents, who likely brought her into their civilization, believing she was destined to ascend to godhood.
Mikula the Kind spoke of the beginning. The seduction and the betrayal. An affair from which gold arose. and so too was Shadow born.
This quote perfectly encapsulates Marika's capacity to seduce, deceive, and seize power. Once again, the comparison to Cersei is automatic, a woman who used love and desire as tools of survival and control. Her relationships reflect this strategic nature. Each partner served as a political purpose, and when they are no longer useful, she discards them. In this way, Marika used affection as a veil for ambition. But there's an important nuance here. Considering her trauma as a shaman survivor, it is possible that love was never a safe or familiar space for her. How could she love when everything she had ever loved was violently taken away? After establishing the Golden Order and defeating her enemies, Marika no longer needed her first consort, Godfrey. The wild warrior, who bears a striking resemblance to Robert Baratheon, was exiled. She stripped him of grace and banished him and his warriors to the lands unknown. My lord, and thy warriors, I devise each of thee of thy grace. With thine eyes dimmed, ye will be driven from the lands between. Ye will wage war in a land afar, where ye will live and die. This echoes the story of Catherine the Great, who didn't hesitate to sideline husband if it meant securing power and stability for the realm. Marika embodies this realpolitik in the intimate sphere of marriage. From that point on, Marika lives solely for the Golden Order, the faith she helped create it. But she still needed an ideal consort, someone who could understand her completely. That person was Aragon, because ultimately he was herself.
In Marika's own words, O Radigan, leal hound of the Golden Order, thou art yet to become me. Thou art yet to become a god. Let us be shattered, both. Mine other self.
In the end, Marika could not allow herself to be loved by anyone but herself. The literary parallels continue. Again, I think of Cersei, who loved only her mirror, her twin, in an obsessive and destructive way. In Elden Ring, Radagon abandons Rennala and returns to Marika. Did he do it out of love, out of duty, or was he simply obeying a higher will or a deeper manipulation? Whatever the reason, Marika never seemed to love, not Godfrey, not Radagon, or perhaps she did and simply chose never to reveal it. After all, the Eternal Queen was supposed to be ethereal, untouchable, admired by all but above all emotion. Not that she really was. At last, I arrive at what Marika ultimately became, a queen, the political leader of a theocracy. Under her rule and the new age of the Earthtree, there was no room for dissent. A theocracy is a form of government in which religious leaders or institutions hold political power, and the laws are based on religious doctrines. In a theocratic system, there is little separation between church and state, meaning that spiritual authority and political authority are deeply intertwined. Rulers may claim divine guidance, and dissent against the government can be seen as a heresy. Marika transformed the lands between, but the cost was high for those who didn't conform. As discussed earlier, the Hornsens were annihilated, and the Omens and the misbegotten were persecuted. In this era, the Golden Order increasingly resembled religious fanaticism. Marika became the head of a monotheism religion, one that left no space for alternative faiths or worldviews. The churches of Marika are found throughout the lands between, marks of conquest and divine authority, not unlike the temples erected in our own world to claim land in the name of faith. Statues of Marika abound, ever present reminders that she was God, spiritual leader, and sovereign, the eternal Marika. The Earthtree governs all. The choice is thine. Become one with the order, or divest thyself of it, to wallow at the fringes, a powerless upstart. Much like Christianity in the Middle Ages, which reinterpreted or eliminated pagan elements to solidify power, Marika also reinterpreted aspects of Hornsen culture. A striking example the living jar. Unlike the jars found in the Land of Shadow, remnants of Hornsent experiments on her people, the living jar in Marika's realm are friendly, created by skilled hands and filled with the flesh of noble warriors, already dead. They are even marked with the Earthtree seal, symbolizing that they have been purified and blessed by the Golden Order. The village of Jarburg is beautiful, serene, and flower-covered, much like the shaman village preserved in the Land of Shadow, paradise that echoes her origins. Yet, the lands between also harbor contradictions. Dominula village stands in stark contrast to the Golden Order, a pagan remnant, home to women who skin their victims. A ghost there whisper, "Eek, I hear a festive melody. No, don't skin me. My hide is filthy, I swear." The villagers seem entranced, indifferent to the player's presence, and notably, a godskin apostle resides here, being directly linked to the Glowing Eye Queen. Why would Marika tolerate such heresy? The delightful festival is an old tradition, one old enough for the Earthtree to tacitly tolerate its endurance. Historically, early Christianity often tolerated pagan rituals as long as they accepted Christian instruction. This helped avoid revolts and facilitated gradual religious conversion. For instance, in Northern Europe, the Norse celebrated Yule, a solstice festival. Instead of suppressing it, the church rebranded it as Christmas, placing Christ's birth on December 25. Also, many pagan communities worship in natural sites like groves or springs. The church would later build cathedrals atop these sacred places, easing the cultural transition, like the Pantheon in Rome, once a temple to all gods, later rededicated by Pope Boniface IV to the Virgin Mary and martyrs. Another pope, Boniface, asked the same to order that in the old temple called the Pantheon, after the pagan filth was removed, a church should be made to the Holy Virgin Mary and all the martyrs, so that the commemoration of the saints would take place henceforth where not gods, but demons were formerly worshipped. This pragmatism allowed Christianity to expand without constant conflict. In the same way, it makes sense that the Golden Order tolerated Dominula as a form of social control and cultural integration. Perhaps the village was allowed to persist discreetly until the shattering broke all order and the rites grew darker. Still, there is the connection to the Glowing Eye Queen, a possibly shamanic ancestor, as mentioned earlier. And given Marika's usual intolerance for dissent, we must also consider another possibility: that Dominula was not merely tolerated but secretly protected. Perhaps this disturbing tradition was a remnant of Marika's shamanic roots, a part of her origin she could not destroy. Maybe she allowed this woman to continue their rites as a quiet acknowledgement of her past. Even if it appeared pagan, it was a reminder of who she once was. After all, we don't know much about the shamans. The Hornsents made sure of that. But it's possible that these people also committed cruel acts, like skinning others. In that case, Dominula village would be continuing this macabre tradition. Through the fusion of religion and politics, Marika committed countless acts of violence in the name of order. She sent Mesmer to exterminate the Hornsents. And yet, for her subjects, the reign of Marika the Eternal was golden. The society functioned, not unlike many moments in human history, even it was built on exclusion and silence. One of our viewers left an interesting comment. I think it is important to distinguish between order and gold, as the game does so in the minor Earthtree incantation and the Shadow Tree itself, which is gold without order. For me, gold represents bounty, fertility, and prosperity, while order represents truth, mathematics, and law. As such, the Golden Order is a combination of these two things to create a working society. This summarizes Marika's legacy well. She built a working society, guided by divine law, truth, and illuminated by the greater will. Prosperity existed, and is visible across the lands between. Anything unclean or out of place was exiled, sealed, or discarded. There was no room for resistance. And through this iron will, Marika's empire prospered, ushering in an age of stability and immortality under the Earth Tree. Her rule lasted so long that people couldn't imagine life without her. And perhaps she succeeded because her will was unmatched. As the description of Gideon of Near Armor states, but when Gideon glimpsed into the will of Queen Marika, he shuddered in fear. At the end, that should not be. The idea of will has deep philosophical roots. For Tomás de Aquino, will is a rational faculty aligned with divine goodness. For Immanuel Kant, it is the ability to act morally through reason. Arthur Schopenhauer, on the other hand, breaks with Kant by asserting that the will is the essence of the world, blind and irrational. The world, he says, is will and representation. Human life is defied by pain and suffering, yet also driven by an incessant and insatiable will. This concept fits Marika well. Driven by pain and endless desire, she rose to godhood, seeking order to end chaos, only to become the architect of a new kind of suffering. Still, she is not simply a villain. As I said before, Marika is a character shattered by trauma, who in seeking a perfect world chose extremes, and was ultimately consumed by them. She reminds me of Inspector Javert from Les Miserables by Victor Hugo. Obsessed with order and justice, Javert is unable to accept the moral ambiguity of Jean Valjean's kindness. When faced with the reality that his worldview is flawed, he collapses. Unable to reconcile law with mercy, Javert cannot bear the contradiction and chooses to end it all. Like Javert, Marika built a rigid system to shield herself from pain, but the world resisted order, and in trying to impose it fully, she brought about war, exclusion, and the collapse of her dreams. In analyzing Marika, we see that absolute power does not grant absolute wisdom or peace. In becoming a god, she severed herself from ordinary life. She became eternal, but also estranged from mortal empathy. Her journey reveals a tragic arc from a shaman to a mother, to the vessel of the greater will, to a queen delusioned by the very order she once created. It is fitting that George R.R. Martin had a hand in crafting Elden Ring's world. Like the best of his queens, Marika can inspire awe, fear, pity, and anger all at once. After all, as Marika herself once declared, I will declare mine intent to search the depths of the Golden Order. Through understanding of the proper way, our faith, our grace is increased. Those blissful early days of blind belief are longer past. My comrades, why must ye falter? If you enjoy this kind of content, where I explore the intersection of video game lore, history, and literature, don't forget to like and subscribe to the channel. Thanks for watching. Until next time, bye!